The millionaire's son who couldn't walk until the new maid did the impossible. They say, sometimes help comes from the person you least expect, and in the way you never imagined. The late afternoon light spilled through the open glass doors, carrying the scent of fresh rain from the garden. On the plush cream rug, Amara lay on her back in a navy dress, her legs raised in the air, balancing little Michael on her feet. The boys' laughter rang out as they clapped hands together, his cheeks glowing with joy. In the doorway, Mr. Whitmore stood in a tailored navy suit, his polished shoes planted firmly on the wooden floor. His expression was unreadable, part surprise, part something deeper, as he watched the scene unfold. For years, no one had dared to get this close to Michael without his father's strict oversight. But here was Amara, the new maid no one had expected, lifting the boy in more ways than one. And in that quiet moment, something unspoken shifted in the room. What happened next would unravel every secret this mansion had been hiding. Where are you watching from? Please tell us in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, turn on all notifications, and join us for more powerful, real, human stories every week. The Whitmore Mansion sat on the edge of Westchester County, like a crown on a hill, its white columns rising against a gray winter sky. Inside, the air was warm but cold in spirit. Every word spoken here carried weight, and every silence carried more. Mr. Henry Whitmore was a man who did not like to be challenged. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples and a suit so crisp it could cut glass. He was the type of man who made boardrooms go quiet with a single glance. And in this house, his word was law. Michael, his only son, was 12 years old and had never taken a step in his life. A spinal condition at birth had left his legs without strength, his balance unreliable. Doctors, therapists, and expensive specialists had all been called in over the years. None had changed his fate. The boy spent most of his days in a wheelchair, rolling from the grand library to the sunroom to the dining table, quiet as a shadow. Henry loved his son. He would say so to anyone who asked, but he loved him in a way that was more about protection than connection. To him, Michael was fragile, and fragility meant control. Every movement, every interaction was monitored. Outsiders didn't touch him. Staff didn't speak to him unless spoken to. And then Amara arrived. She came on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. The agency had sent her after the last maid left abruptly, claiming the Whitmore household was too tense to breathe in. Amara stepped out of the taxi with a single worn suitcase and a uniform folded neatly in her arms. She was in her early 30s, with a posture both humble and unyielding. Her skin was deep brown, her hair wrapped in a navy scarf. She didn't look like someone who scared easily. When the butler, Reeves, led her inside, she took in the sweeping staircase, the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors. But her eyes didn't linger there. They lingered on Michael, who was sitting by the fireplace, knees covered by a cashmere blanket, quietly sketching in a notebook. Their eyes met for less than a second, his curious, hers steady, before Reeves hurried her toward the kitchen. For the first week, Amara kept to herself. She cleaned the rooms, polished the silver, and moved silently through the house like she'd been there for years. But she noticed things. The way Mr. Whitmore's voice would lower when he spoke to Michael, like every word was wrapped in caution. The way Michael's gaze often drifted toward the window, as if the world outside was calling to him. And the way the boy would glance at her when he thought she wasn't looking. It was on the 10th day that the moment happened. Michael had dropped a blanket from his lap while sitting in the main living room. His father was in his study, and Reeves was nowhere in sight. Amara walked in with a folded laundry pile, saw the blanket on the floor, and bent to pick it up. "Don't touch him." The voice cracked like a whip. Mr. Whitmore had appeared in the doorway, his eyes narrowed, his jaw rigid. The gold cufflinks on his sleeves caught the light as he stepped forward, placing himself between her and his son. Amara straightened slowly, the blanket still in her hands. I don't care what you were just doing," he cut in, his tone cold. "You don't approach my son without permission. Ever." Michael's head sank lower, his hands tightening over his lap. Amara's eyes flicked to him, just a moment, and something passed between them. It wasn't pity. It wasn't defiance. It was understanding. She folded the blanket over the back of the chair, nodded once, and left the room without another word. That night, in the staff quarters, Reeves shook his head at her. "You've got to be careful," he warned. "The boss, he's protective. Too protective. People who cross that line don't last here." Amara only smiled faintly. "I'm not here to cross lines, Reeves. I'm here to take care of the boy." Days turned into weeks, and Amara did her job without confrontation. But she was watching. Every time she entered a room where Michael sat, she greeted him softly, even if he didn't reply. Sometimes she left small things for him on the side table. A bookmark in the shape of a dragon, a perfectly sharpened pencil, a sprig of rosemary from a garden. He never thanked her out loud, but one day she noticed a bookmark tucked neatly into a sketchbook. One rainy afternoon, when the sound of water against the windows filled the house, Amara found Michael alone in the library. He was straining to reach a book from the lower shelf, his wheelchair locked in place. "Need a hand?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then nodded. She passed him the book, and for the first time, he spoke to her. "Thank you." It was barely a whisper, but it was enough to make her heart warm. Over the next few days, they began to talk, quietly in corners, when no one else was listening. Michael told her about the books he liked, the places he'd read about, the paintings he wanted to see. She told him about the village she grew up in, where children ran barefoot, and the sky at night looked like spilled diamonds. One afternoon, she asked him, "Do you want to try standing?" His eyes widened. I can't." "You've never tried with me," she said simply. He shook his head, fear and longing tangled in his expression. "Father would never allow it." Amara leaned closer, her voice a low whisper. "Sometimes the only permission you need is your own." Michael looked away, but she saw the spark in his eyes. That spark stayed. A week later, when Mr. Whitmore was away on a business trip, Amara wheeled Michael into the sunroom. The light streamed through the tall glass panes, pooling on the polished floor. She moved his chair close to the sturdy wooden table and held out her hands. "Just for a moment," she said. He stared at her, his breath uneven. "If I fall, I'll catch you." Slowly, cautiously, he placed his hands in hers. His fingers were cold. She guided him to the edge of the chair, her voice steady calm. One foot, then the other. His legs trembled, but they moved. For the first time in his life, Michael Whitmore stood, wobbly, terrified, but standing. A sound escaped his throat, half laugh, half gasp. Amara's eyes shone, but her grip was firm. "See? You're taller than you thought." They didn't hear the footsteps approaching. "Michael?" The voice was sharp, dangerous. Mr. Whitmore had returned earlier than expected. He stood in the doorway, his face pale with something between fury and shock. Michael froze. Amara didn't let go. Mr. Whitmore's voice could cut glass. "What is going on here?" Michael's hands twitched in Amara's grip, but she didn't let go. The boy's knees trembled beneath him, the strain clear in every muscle of his small body. Henry Whitmore stepped into the sunroom, his polished shoes silent against the rug. The air between them seemed to shrink, the golden light from the glass wall now feeling colder. "I asked you a question," he said again, quieter this time, which somehow made it worse. Michael's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted between his father and Amara. Amara finally spoke, her tone calm, her eyes never leaving Henry's. "He was standing, sir." "Standing." Henry's brow furrowed as though the word itself was foreign. "You think this is a game? You think I don't know my son's condition?" Michael's breathing quickened. Amara could feel the tremors in his hands. "Sir, I didn't force him," she said softly. "He wanted to try. That's not the point." Henry's voice boomed, echoing off the glass. "You don't understand." He cut himself short, glancing at Michael as if the boy shouldn't hear what came next. Amara stepped slightly in front of the wheelchair, shielding Michael without making it obvious. "With respect, Mr. Whitmore, I do understand. I've seen the look in his eyes when he watches the world go by from that chair. He's stronger than you think." Henry's jaw tightened. "You've been here a month, And suddenly you know my son better than I do? I don't claim to know him better, she said, voice steady. But I see him. Those words hung heavy in the room. Henry's nostrils flared. He turned to Michael. Sit down. Now. The boy hesitated. It was the smallest pause, barely 2 seconds, but Henry caught it. His gaze shifted, sharp and searching, like he was looking at a stranger. Michael, Amara helped him ease back into the chair. She could feel the victory in his trembling smile, even if his father couldn't. Henry said nothing else. He turned on his heel and left, his steps measured, his posture rigid. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael exhaled shakily. He's mad. Amara knelt beside him, her voice gentle. Yes, but that doesn't erase what you just did. That night at dinner, Henry barely spoke. The clink of silverware against china was the only sound, aside from the occasional polite murmur from Reeves as he served. Michael avoided his father's gaze, focusing on cutting his food into perfect, tiny pieces. Halfway through the meal, Henry set his knife down and spoke, without looking up. You'll have a new therapist starting next week. Michael's fork froze midair. What happened to Dr. Klein? She's too lenient, Henry said, his tone clipped. You need someone who understands limits. Michael said nothing, but Amara, standing discreetly near the sideboard, caught the faintest tightening of his jaw. The next morning, Henry left early for a meeting in the city. As soon as the front door closed, Michael wheeled himself into the kitchen, where Amara was peeling apples. Will you help me again? His voice was quiet, but urgent. Amara glanced toward the hallway. He'll be gone all day? Michael nodded. This time, they went to the long hallway on the second floor. The carpet there was thick, and the walls were lined with family portraits. Generations of Whitmores staring down with cold, painted eyes. Michael gripped her hands and stood again. His legs wobbled, but he didn't fall. Amara encouraged him to take a step. It was clumsy, awkward, but it was a step. Then another. He laughed. A real laugh, sharp and bright. You see, Amara smiled. Your legs remember more than you think. I feel like I'm flying, he said, grinning wide. They didn't hear Reeves until he cleared his throat from the far end of the hall. His eyes flicked between them, his expression unreadable. Mr. Whitmore will not be pleased. Amara straightened. He doesn't have to know. Reeves hesitated, then nodded slowly. I didn't see a thing. And he walked away. Over the next 2 weeks, they practiced in secret. Michael's legs grew stronger, his steps steadier. Sometimes he held on to Amara's hands, other times the wall. Once, he made it from the sunroom to the library without sitting down. But the change wasn't just physical. He began speaking more at dinner, even making small jokes. He spent less time staring out the window and more time sketching scenes from memory. The garden, the fountain, the old oak tree on the edge of the property. One rainy evening, while Amara was folding laundry, Michael asked a question that stopped her cold. Do you think my father's afraid? Afraid of what? Of me getting better. She set the shirt down and met his gaze. Why would you think that? He shrugged, looking away. If I can walk, I don't need him as much. And I think he likes when people need him. Amara didn't answer right away. Sometimes, she said at last, people hold on so tightly to protecting someone that they don't realize they're holding them back. The next morning, the storm broke. Henry came home early from a business trip. Walking into the sunroom just as Michael was taking shaky steps toward the window, Amara close behind. Henry froze. What is this? Michael stopped mid-step, his face pale. Father, You've been doing this behind my back? His voice was low, but vibrating with anger. Do you have any idea what could happen if you fall? I won't fall, Michael said, more firmly than either of them expected. Henry's eyes snapped to Amara. You, out, now. I'm not leaving him like this, she said quietly. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. The powerful businessman and the maid no one had respected. Then Henry's voice hardened. Pack your things. Michael's hands tightened into fists. No. His voice cracked, but the word was sharp. She's helping me more than anyone ever has. Henry turned to him, stunned into silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Rain tapped against the glass. Finally, Henry spoke again, his voice quieter. "Michael, you don't understand." "Maybe I do," Michael said, his chin lifting. "Maybe I understand that you're scared. But I'm not." The words landed like stones in a room. Amara's heart was pounding. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Henry Whitmore wasn't a man who backed down easily. And now, lines had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Henry didn't raise his voice. That, more than anything, made the air in the sunroom heavier. "Michael," he said slowly, "you will return to your chair, and Amara will leave this house." Michael's breathing hitched. His hands gripped the armrest of the wheelchair, though he was still standing. "If she leaves, I'll stop trying. I mean it." Henry's eyes flicked to his son. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. Not the quiet understanding that Michael shared with Amara, but an older, more complicated history. Henry's jaw tightened. "You don't mean that." "I do," Michael said. His voice wavered, but his eyes didn't. "You've never listened to me before. Start now." Henry's hand twitched at his side, the faintest crack in his composure. Amara stood still, not wanting to intrude, but ready to step in if Michael faltered. She'd learned something in her short time here. The boy's courage wasn't loud, but it was stubborn. Henry finally turned away. "My office, both of you," the walk, or in Michael's case, the shaky shuffle to his chair, was silent. The corridors of the mansion seemed longer than usual, lined with oil paintings of ancestors whose stern faces seemed to watch every step. Inside the office, the scent of leather and cigar smoke hung in the air. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves loomed over them, heavy with volumes no one had touched in years. Henry shut the door. He moved behind his desk, but didn't sit. His eyes were fixed on Amara. "I don't know what your plan is, but it ends now." "My plan?" Amara's voice was calm, but there was steel under it. "My plan is to give your son what he's been denied for 12 years, a chance." Henry leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Do you think I haven't tried? I've spent more money than most people see in a lifetime on doctors, therapists, treatments. And every time, I've been told the same thing. It's not possible. I will not have him crushed by false hope." Amara took a step closer. "You've been protecting yourself, not him." Henry's gaze hardened. "Watch yourself." "I am," she replied. "And I'm watching him too. Every time he looks out that window, every time he hesitates to laugh, because he's afraid of falling short of your expectations. I see it. He's not fragile, Mr. Whitmore. You are." Silence. Michael shifted in his chair, his voice quiet but firm. "She's right." Henry looked at him sharply. "Michael, I've been more afraid of disappointing you than of falling down," Michael said. "That's not living." Henry's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at the desk, his fingers tapping once against the polished wood. For the first time, Amara saw something in his face. Not just anger, but weariness. A man who'd been carrying something for too long. "You think I don't want to see you walk?" Henry said finally, his voice rougher. "Do you know what it would mean to me? To your mother?" Michael's head tilted slightly. "Mom." Henry froze. Amara's brows drew together. She hadn't heard a word about Michael's mother since she arrived. Not once. Henry sank into his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. "Your mother, she died in this house. The day you were born." The room went still. Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. "What?" Henry looked up at him, the mask slipping for a moment. "It was complicated. You were born early. The labor, it was difficult. She wanted a home birth, and I didn't listen to the doctors. By the time they arrived..." His voice broke, but he forced it steady. "She never held you." Michael's hands gripped the armrest tighter. "And you blame me." Henry's eyes widened. "No." "Yes," Michael said, his voice cracking. "You've treated me like glass my whole life. Like something that might shatter at any second. You think I don't see it? You think I don't feel it?" Amara stood perfectly still, her heart pounding. She understood now the control, the fear, the overprotection. It wasn't just about Michael's condition. It was about Henry's guilt. Henry leaned forward, his voice low. "I've been trying to keep you safe. You've been keeping me small," Michael said. The words hit like a stone in water, rippling through the space between them. Henry's gaze shifted to Amara, and for once, there was no hostility, only something that looked almost like defeat. "And you think you can change this in a few weeks?" "I don't have to change everything," Amara said. "I just have to give him back the parts you took away." Henry sat back, the leather chair creaking. His fingers drummed against the armrest. Slower now. "If he gets hurt, he will." Amara interrupted softly. "That's life. You can't protect him from pain, Mr. Whitmore, but you can give him the strength to stand through it." The clock on the mantel ticked, each second stretching long. Finally, Henry spoke again, his tone reluctant. "1 month. That's all you get. If he's not stronger by then, this stops." "Agreed." Amara glanced at Michael. The boy's eyes were bright, determined. "Agreed." That month became the most important 30 days of Michael's life. They trained every morning after breakfast, starting with standing, then taking steps along the hallway. Amara taught him to fall safely, to use the walls, to trust his own legs. Some days were better than others. There were tumbles, moments of frustration, and times when his legs refused to cooperate. But every time he fell, he got back up. Henry watched from a distance. He never joined them, but Amara noticed him standing in doorways, silent, his expression unreadable. One afternoon, while Michael practiced in the sunroom, Henry finally spoke. "His balance is better." Amara glanced at him. "Yes." Henry's eyes stayed on his son. "He smiles more now." "Yes," she said again. Henry said nothing else, but he didn't leave either. As the month drew to a close, Michael could walk the length of the sunroom without support. His steps were still slow, still careful, but they were his. And then, on the final day, something happened that none of them expected. The morning of the 30th day arrived with a soft winter sun spilling over the Whitmore estate. The air was still, almost expectant, as though the walls themselves knew something was about to change. Michael stood at one end of the sunroom, his wheelchair parked far behind him. Amara stood a few paces away, her arms open just enough to steady him if needed. Henry was there too, leaning against the doorframe, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Whenever you're ready," Amara said gently. Michael took a breath. His first step was careful, but firm, then another, and another. Henry's arms crossed, but his eyes followed each movement with sharp attention. When Michael reached the middle of the room, his legs trembled. "I can do it," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. He took another step. Halfway across, he stumbled. His arms flailed, and Henry instinctively pushed out the doorframe. But before he could reach him, Michael caught himself against the wall and stayed standing. The boy looked up, chest heaving, a smile breaking through his fear. "See? I didn't fall." Something in Henry's face cracked, a flicker of pride, quickly swallowed by something heavier. He stepped forward slowly, stopping just short of the sun. "Michael, I should have let you try years ago." Michael's smile softened. "You were scared." Henry's eyes glistened, and for once he didn't try to hide it. "When your mother died, I promised her I'd protect you. I thought if I controlled everything, nothing could happen to you. But I see now, I've been keeping you from living." Amara stayed silent, letting the moment belong to them. Henry reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and rested it on Michael's shoulder. "I'm sorry, son." Michael's throat bobbed, his eyes damp. "I forgive you, but I'm not going back to the chair." Henry gave a small, almost disbelieving laugh. "No, you're not." For a long moment, they stood there, father, son, and the maid who'd quietly torn down years of fear. It was then Henry turned to Amara. "I misjudged you." Amara met his gaze evenly. "You protected him with everything you had. I just gave him the courage to use what he's had all along." Henry nodded slowly. You've done more for him in a month than anyone else has in 12 years. I want you to stay, not as a maid, as part of this family." Amara blinked, caught off guard. "That's kind, Mr. Whitmore, but—" Michael cut in. "Please stay." Amara looked between them. She thought of the day she first arrived, of the boys staring out the window, of the man guarding his son like a fortress guards its gates. And now, they stood together, open to the world for the first time. She smiled. "All right, I'll stay." Weeks turned into months, and Michael's progress continued. He still used a chair for long distances, but more and more, he chose his own feet. The house felt warmer now, less like a gallery of silent portraits, and more like a home. And one spring afternoon, Amara watched from the porch as Michael walked across the lawn toward the old oak tree on the edge of property. Henry walked beside him, not holding his arm, just walking with him. When they reached the tree, Michael stopped and looked back toward the house. Amara waved, and he waved back, tall, steady, unafraid. Moral lesson. Sometimes, the miracle isn't in what someone gives you, but in what they help you find inside yourself. Protection has its place, but freedom, even the freedom of fall, is what allows us to grow. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And if this story touched you, hit that subscribe button, turn on all notifications, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that it's never too late to take the first step.